One would think that using a leather strop to hand sharpen your blades would be obvious. May not necessarily be the case. Let's talk about possibly the single biggest gripe that woodworkers have with strops. The biggest problem most people have with using a strop when sharpening their tools is the fact that when you are using a strop, it can potentially roll over your cutting edge that you took so long to form on your stones. How's it? My name is Dylan, this is Flaw Creations, and as always, welcome to my workshop. This is a little bit of a shoot from the hip or on a whim video. I don't even have a script, not that I ever follow script. But I realized after making my previous video on how to make a strop in your own workshop is there may be some questions that I left unanswered during that process. And the first one would be is, what honing compound do I use on the strop? And honestly, I can tell you the manufacturer, but I can't tell you the grit. It's a local manufacturer here in South Africa, and I just know it's the white compound. Through experimentation, I've come to like that particular grit for my own work. I'm showing you a video B-roll where I am applying the honing compound to the strop. I will be leaving a link in the description to a page on Lee Valley's website where they actually take the different grits from different manufacturers, their stones and so forth, and compare them to one another and let you know how the stones compare with different stones from different manufacturers. You wouldn't be surprised to learn that there's no standardization of grits between manufacturers. So what would be 1,000 grits on one manufacturer isn't necessarily the same for another. Go and have a look at that spreadsheet. I always give the link to people that I teach, especially the beginners. I find it quite useful. But back to the biggest issue that a lot of people have with using a strop. And rightly so. It's not a matter of opinion in this case. A strop will roll over your cutting edge on the blade if you're not careful, and there are 4 reasons why that could happen. So I'm going to give you the 4 reasons, but I'm going to give you some of the solutions as well, and towards the end I'll tell you why I like strops, or suggesting strops for beginners, and how you can use one of the biggest negatives on the strop to your advantage, especially if you are a beginner. So let's list those reasons. One is you're stropping against the natural grain of the suede you are using on the strop. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the grain of the leather, go back to my previous video. I cover it there. I'm leaving the link on the screen. The best way to get around that is to always strop in the correct grain direction of the leather you are using, and you can fix that during the making process in your shop. So go back and have a look at that video for more information. The second is putting down too much pressure on your blade when you are stropping, and that's a common issue. It's probably one of the most questions I get during live and one-on-one classes is how much pressure do you put down? And beginners, especially until they develop a certain amount of experience, tends to put down too much pressure. And what will happen is, as you put down too much pressure, the strop or the leather will roll up behind your cutting edge and then roll over the front of your cutting edge. And it gets worse the more pressure you put down on the blade. Still happens to me, especially when I'm in a hurry. The third one is having the chisel up or any blade up too high, trying to hit your secondary bevel, and I'll show you on the other camera how that works. So often what will happen is you'll find the primary bevel, lift the handle to try and hit the secondary bevel, and inadvertently you lift the handle too high, and because you lift it too high, you roll over the edge. That's quite a common problem. At the end I'll give you some advice on how to get around that one. Then the fourth one is your stropping technique, and I find that that's especially the case on the longer strops that I tend to make. My body mechanics and my muscle memory, as I come off the strop, what I do is I lift the handle and I curve or curl the tool up, and showing you on the other camera, this is what it would look like. You typically would do that, and at the end of the stroke Doesn't matter how well you do the first part of the stroke, at the end of the stroke, you roll it over. Best way to handle that is to strop and then lift in a straight line away from the strop as I'm doing now. So rather than curling the handle up, just lift the tool away from the strop. Demonstrating again. So you're stropping and lifting away from the surface of the strop at the end of your stroke, and that will mitigate that issue to quite an extent as well. Why would I suggest strops for beginners especially? There are a lot of suggestions out there that you need to get around this issue, but by using a very fine diamond stone or a wet stone, a ceramic stone with very high grit, and that will relieve that issue. True, I don't have an issue with that. However, the cost addition of having those extra stones may be prohibitive for especially beginners. You can make a leather strop from scraps in your workshop. I always have a ready supply of leather lying around. And strops are cheap, they are easy to make, and you can have multiple strops. So therefore you can also have strops with different grits of honing compound in your workshop, especially in the experimental phase of your sharpening journey. So I will always defer to suggesting that beginners use strops and learn proper technique rather than avoid the problem. You can actually use the disadvantage of a strop, and that's the pliable, or the fact that your leather can flex. You can use that to your advantage as a beginner to hit the correct angles on your blades when you go over to the strop. And the way you do that is you come to the strop, you find the primary bevel, you place all your pressure towards the front part, remember not too much pressure, and then you strop. And what happens is you now have the handle lower than you think you might need it, and the rollover or the flex in the leather causes you to hit the correct angles, and it works really well. So you can use the negative aspects of a leather strop to your advantage, especially if you are a beginner. Excuse me. So that brings us to the end of this shoot from the hip video edition. Thank you for joining me. The edges you get off a strop are very sharp, so be careful of those sharp edges. Be safe in your workshop, and until we see one another again, hope you have a good one. Cheers.